weapons for your tank, etc. A lot of games, when you first drop into a game, you know, Half-Life, for instance, the first thing you do is you go around the world with your crowbar and hit everything to find out what the relevant nouns are. So you're actually using your crowbar to interrogate the world to find out what the syntax and the grammar of that world is. Or in Grand Theft Auto, you go around and find out what you can crash into or not. You know? So really, that's one of the fundamental aspects of the game player engages in, is kind of learning the syntax of that game by interrogating the world with the verbs available. Typically, even the way we represent things, you know, they tend to pop out if they're relevant nouns. You know, so for instance, here the tanks and buildings are a little more saturated in color than the background trees, which are not really relevant nouns in this environment. You know, typically most games have a very limited set of verbs, kill or destroy. And you know, the adjectives are also very neat, and want to be visually apparent to the player. The type of games I do tend to kind of build on that a little bit. You know, we give the player in a lot of cases lower level nouns, like buildings and city, for instance. They use those lower level nouns to construct a larger noun, in this case a city. And at the same time, there's another verb, which is the simulator coming in and modifying the whole thing. So really, there are two sets of verbs. There's the simulator verbs, how it's modifying what you've made, and the construction that the player is actually operating upon. Now, the first computer I got was an Apple II computer back around 1980. It was, you know, for its time, an amazing machine. I found one of the early ads for it, and they were trying to tell people how powerful this machine was because they didn't understand computers. So they were advertising that it was 6 times faster than a teletype. It's not like I had a teletype that I was replacing. So, and I didn't even know how fast a teletype was, but it sounded fast, you know. Now, back when we were doing games early on, we had this concept of a memory map. This is way before we had memory management, all this fancy stuff. And a programmer would actually go through and figure out what every byte of memory was going to do. And we'd actually put all our graphics in here, all of our code, our sound, everything. And in general, you know, most games around that time, about half the memory was occupied by computer code, algorithms, and the other half was data, which really was the graphics and sound of the game. That's interesting because the code in this case really represented the internal verbs of the game, and the data were the nouns that we're operating on. And they were roughly in balance back then. Then, at some point, this thing came out, the CD-ROM. And it held a whopping 600 megabytes of data, which at the time was inconceivable to us. You know, it was like the super tanker of data that we could stick into our computer now, and it was like, oh my God, how are we possibly going to fill that CD with data? And so we kind of got in the business in games of finding ways to basically generate large amounts of data, you know, kind of shovel it onto that disk, and have a small amount of code learn and operate and modify it. Really, in some sense, the CD-ROM represented, you know, an extinction event in computer games. Basically, the extinction of the algorithm, the way games were thought of, the way we thought about making games. And data became basically the king of the realm.